So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, comments, or whatever? No. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. State and federal updates.
Ron, if you're on the phone, do you want to go first with the state update?
Sure, I'll be glad. I'll be glad to. Thank you, Brad, and thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be pretty brief. So as you all know, we had our first PSTA Tallahassee trip a couple of weeks ago. We had Patty, Richard, Brad, and Whitney join us. Probably had about 12 or so meetings, including we had a meeting with the DOT Secretary, which I think was very productive. Kind of shared with him our priorities, what we're working on. I think he's very interested in some of the innovative things we've been doing over the last few years. So I think that was a well-timed meeting with them. I think the one thing that came out of the trip, and Brad, I'll let you kind of expand upon this a little bit, is we're hearing that transportation disadvantage dollars may be, they may be actually receiving less dollars this year than years past. And that one of the things that the commission may be having to do is look at to try to stretch those dollars as far as we possibly can, is not putting dollars into some type of an innovation grant, which would impact us, is because that's the way we fund our partnership for our late shift program with Uber. And so Alan and I have been proactive on that. When we've heard that, what Alan and I have done is we've actually reached out to the chair in the Senate, Senator Hudson, to let him know that there may be a shortfall there. And anything that they can do. We're not asking for a member project. Let me be clear on that. What we're asking for is if they can try to have enough dollars in there to ensure that the innovation grant side of it could also be funded, basically trying to get them to the same funding as close as possible as last year. So, Alan, is there anything I'm missing on that? I know you're the one that reached out, I think, to Senator Hudson's office and had that conversation.
No, that's pretty much spot on. I mean, our conversation was that, you know, the innovation fund and the success that we've seen and the national recognition that PSTA has gotten is really a model for the country, and to have a year where we can't move forward that would really be a shame. And I think he's committed to working with us on a solution. So I think we're kind of at the beginning of that process now. So not knowing exactly what the solution is, but he understands the impact and the success and wants to work with us.
Okay.
Brad, am I missing anything there you want to add?
Commissioner Johnson has her hand raised.
Yes, I was going to recognize her as soon as everybody else finished speaking. Patty, did you have anything else, Ron, that you needed to share before Patty has a meltdown over here?
No, we have a couple other items. I don't know if you want me to go through this first, or if you want to have Patty go first.
Let's tackle this first issue about the transportation disadvantage.
Okay, you know that Stephen Holmes showed up here for our local coordinating board, right? Yes, no?
Yes.
We do have
I had done
yes,
it.
ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay, he gave great input during the meeting to all of the people that are on the board. One of the things that he said was, we need to come up with something else innovative. And I'm like, we've innovated everything, and we need to continue with what we're doing. And the other thing is, this morning at our Florida League call-in, when I was listening, there's a bill that wants to expand transportation disadvantage. However, I didn't hear any money that goes with it and might be part of that $1.7 million loss in funding. It is a trust fund, so they're going to have to find somewhere to pull that money from. And so I don't have the number of the bill. I'm sure that we can
Do you know how it was supposed to be expanded? Cover additional people, or what do you?
Additional rural areas.
Oh.
Which may be cringe. So I don't know. I know it's up this week.
So, Madam Chair.
Ron, Alan, any comments? What?
Yeah,
Sorry, I had it on.
I'm not
Sorry.
I was on mute, so I apologize. We're looking as we speak. We're not aware of any bills. I know there's been a couple of bills out there in the last couple of years that have been trying to expand it to, expand the program. Again, I can't imagine they're going to try to expand or do additional things with it at this point. It's Steve Holmes and others is telling us that they may not have enough money to do some innovation things moving forward.
All right, well, you'll check that out and keep it on your radar and get back to us when you learn some kind of an update. And I'd be interested, just because there's a bill in one house doesn't mean there is on the other side.
Sure.
Right.
Absolutely. We'll keep you updated.
Thank you.
So,
Madam Chair, the only other two things that I have are, number one, House Bill 385. There's a House bill that's out there. There's a Senate bill as well. I believe it's 898. It's a general transportation bill by Avila, and I know there's been a lot of email traffic with some members of this committee about it. Right now with the bill, there's one section of the bill that in the future would prevent any dollars that would be approved by a referendum, by a local referendum for transportation, for those dollars not to be spent on operations. What they're trying to do is impact MDX in South Florida. We have been assured by Avila, we've been talking to staff in the House, at the next committee stop, they're gonna, and you can't do it as a general bill where it's impacting only Miami-Dade, so I think you're gonna see them kind of carve out some specific counties in South Florida. At the next committee stop though, it should basically eliminate the impact it would have on any counties in Tampa Bay. So just FYI, that's out there, and we'll keep you updated at the next committee stop when that's moving. But there's been a lot of different correspondence between PSTA, HART, T-BARTA, and other groups in the region on that. So
Ron, what was the Senate bill again? I didn't get the Senate bill number.
I believe it's 898.
898. Okay, thank you. Well, if that's what Avila wanted to do, why didn't he just file a local bill?
Well, and that's a good question, and I can let Alan jump in here, but Nunez, when she was in the House the last 3 years, has filed a similar bill, and it never made it to the finish line. So yes, 898 by Diaz, by the way, just confirmed. So we expect it to change. Again, to your point, I'm not sure why they would do a local bill, but they filed it in this. This is a pretty big transportation bill with a bunch of other stuff in it.
Okay, well, that's what we're paying you for.
Yep. The last two things that are really the last thing for you is quick. Obviously one of the things we're doing is supporting T-BARTA's legislative agenda. We are asking, as you know, T-BARTA is asking for $1.5 million in recurring. We believe we're very well positioned in the Senate. We're actually so well positioned in the Senate. The Senate Transportation Economic Development Appropriations Chair, Senator Hudson, reached out to myself and Alan and others, basically asking us if T-BARTA would be willing to potentially receive additional dollars for planning projects for other transportation projects in the region. We're not sure what those projects are going to be yet, but I think what the Senate's concern is, they're getting requests from other folks that are looking for transportation planning dollars that are for projects that are regional or could tie into a regional plan. So, Alan, I don't know if you want to kind of expand upon that to let the committee know kind of what the thoughts are.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Very briefly, in talking with Senator Hudson, who chairs the committee, just as Ron said, he's been kind of inundated with you, if you will, from other entities in the region who are looking at whether it be innovative projects or just new technologies or what have you. And instead of funding, I'm just going to throw, I don't know a number, but I'll throw a number out there just as an example. Instead of funding 7 different projects that he kind of chooses, he's not from Tampa Bay, he's not from the region. He doesn't want to be, he doesn't want to kind of pick the winners and losers, so to speak. He certainly talked with President Galvano, certainly talked with Senator Brandis and others. But instead of doing that, what he has said is, when we know the budget allocations and I know how much money we have, if we chose to fund some of these projects and have T-BARTA be the kind of the anchor for looking at some of these proposed whether they be technologies or other types of projects, then, I would like to give them additional planning dollars. And that's when he's working with Senator Brandis very closely and the rest of our leadership, and he's keeping Ron and I we're included in all of those conversations. And so I think what we would see, if it happens, what we would see is an additional amount of money on top of the 1.5 operating that would go toward looking at some, again, I'm using the innovative technologies just as an example, but we'll know what those priorities are. We will have an opportunity to work with them on making sure we fully understand what their intent is. And they really see this as and all the way to President Galvano, seeing this as one of the missions of TBARTA moving forward, is to really be the vetting organization, or whatever we want to call it, for some of these things that are being considered around the region. So we see it as long as they continue to do what they've done to date, which is to keep us very included, keep us in the loop, and work with our regional leaders who are extremely supportive of TBARTA. Then, as Ron and I have talked, we think this is a good development. Again, as long as they continue to do what they say they're going to do, we believe they will. I don't think there's any reason to doubt that they're going to continue to keep us right where we are.
So I just have one response to that story. And I'm fine with, in theory, it sounds great, unless they enshrine in the appropriation what it is that we have to do with that money. Because it occurs to me that it could be in direct conflict with some other priorities that the region has already established. So have they said anything to you about that?
So I think what I have been told will make you feel more comfortable with this. That's exactly what they don't want to do. What he doesn't want to do, what the chairman told me he doesn't want to do, is to go into the bill and proviso out, $1 million or $1.5 million or whatever the number ends up being, and break it down in 7 different ways and say these are the 7 things or the 10 things or the 5 things that you have to go do. He said, what I would rather do is give you a bucket of money that is there for, and if you look at the language in Senator Brandis, in his the submission to the Senate, the submittal form for the appropriation, the only thing that's in there, they put additional dollars in, I believe it was contracted service. I don't have it in front of me right now, but it was in the bucket for studies and contracted services. And so the intent right now is for them to specifically not to do that, because he could go do that now. He could do that without ever having to. We hope he would never do it, but he could go in now and say, these are the 7 things you're going to do that somebody else in the region has asked me to do for you. And he said, I don't want to be in that business. I'm not from your region. I don't know the priorities. What I would rather do, it seems like there's after speaking with Senator Brandis and President Galvano and others, it seems like this is the role, one of the roles that TBARTA should play. I'd rather just give you a chunk of study money and you all vet those opportunities as they align with the regional priorities.
Great. That sounds like a great idea. Anybody have any questions? Thoughts? Okay, we're all good here.
Great.
Good. Madam Chair, the only other thing I have is, TBARTA has its 2 small changes they want to make to their Enabling Act. We've been working with Senator Lee, who's the chairman of the Transportation Committee in the Senate, and we believe that language is going to be included in the Transportation DOT bill. That should come out later this week. The 2 minor changes, just to remind everybody, is number 1, to allow the mayors to appoint a designee, which is the way it used to be prior to 2 years ago. And the last one is to give TBARTA the ability to be able to vote by phone or other electronic means for board meetings and committee meetings as well. Madam Chair, that's all we have.
Thank you. That is perfectly great news. Thank you very much. Any questions, thoughts, anybody? Anything? Brad?
Just one thing, Ron. Thank you very much for that. I did get a note from the TBARTA legal counsel, Alan Zimmett, that he had shared with you some of his drafted language. He wanted to connect with you about the language to effectuate those 2 TBARTA changes.
Yeah, Brad, we have it. Thank you. And we've actually shared those. And I'll let Alan know this. I've not done that yet. Let him know we've shared that with committee staff. Our language is basically identical to what he gave us.
Okay.
There's a couple of minor, very, very, very minor changes, but our language is basically identical to what he gave us as well. So we should be good.
Great, thank you. Anything else?
If I could just ask, maybe Ron, you can give, if there's any other update on the couple of things that we also talked about in Tallahassee when we were up there about Medicaid and the Uber bill that Senator Brandis has filed to have Uber and Lyft provide Medicaid trips. Anything on the, I'm assuming there's nothing to report additional on the bed tax. And then just to report that Chair Long and I had a good meeting with the top administrator at the Pinellas County Schools, who was very positive about coordinating with PSTA. And we offered, if they come back to us and tell us that there's any state legislation or that needs to be considered, we don't know of any. But if the school district comes back and says, well, there's certain provisions within our state funding that preclude us from partnering with you, PSTA, that we would advocate on behalf of changing those once they tell us what they might be. So FYI on that. But if you could just update us on the Medicaid bill, and especially.
Sure. So number one, from a bed tax standpoint, there's nothing new to report there, and I would guess at this point, I don't think you're probably going to have anything that's going to happen this year on the bed tax. I mean, I think we kind of were shared by a couple people during our trip that I don't think that's going to happen. Number two is Senator Brandis has a bill. I believe it's 660. I believe. Let me double check the bill number here. It basically would allow T&C's transportation network companies, or what is considered Uber and or Lyft or any other group in the future, to be eligible for non-emergency trips, to be eligible for Medicaid reimbursed trips. It's in the process. It has not. That's not it. Actually, I'm lying to you. It's not 660. Let me find the bill number here. But it has been heard in its first committee of reference in the Senate. It's going to move probably later this week in the House. It's just another tool in the toolbox to allow us. It doesn't change the way the current system is. They still have to go through brokers and all those different things. It would just allow them to be eligible to reimburse by Medicaid for non-emergency transportation services. And the bill number is Senate Bill 302. Senate Bill 302.
What is the House bill?
It is 411.
Thank
And it's
you.
sponsored by Danny Perez in South Florida.
Thank you.
Well, that's very promising. Thank you.
Anything else, Brad?
I think we're good.
Do we have another legislative committee meeting prior to April 1st on the agenda? No. Do we want to talk?
But we do, and just know, Madam Chair, that our next trip will be April 1st through the 3rd. We're also going to have David Green with T. Barta joining us for that trip.
Okay. And I would like to, well, I need to talk to Brad first, but then I'd like to chat with you about that particular schedule, Ron, if we could, offline.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? No? Okay, then, we are adjourned. Where's my
No,
dad?
federal.
Oh, are you on there, Harry?
Yes.
Harry and Shannon are both here.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Went right out of my mind. Sorry. Thank you, Charlie.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, Brad didn't say anything either, so
I raised my hand.
Okay, go ahead, Harry.
So a couple things, just to update you. I think since the last legislative committee meeting, Congress finished up its fiscal year 19 appropriations work, and Shannon was going to kind of just give you, I know we sent a memo down, but I'm not sure if everybody saw it. So Shannon, you want to just give them an overview of the highlights?
Sure.
So just so you know, the bill provided about $71 billion for DOT. In that amount, there was $13.4 billion given to FTA. And most importantly, there was $2.55 billion given for the Capital Investment Grants Program, which includes $526.5 million for the small starts, which is what the BRT project is looking to be funded out of. It also includes bill language, which requires the Secretary to propose funding allocations for that program in the annual report to Congress, which in the past this administration has not provided any funding allocations or recommendations for project funding to Congress. That's now going to be required, and it also requires the Secretary to maintain all the funding commitments for existing grant agreements that rate a medium or higher for FY19 and 20. So that's good news. And it also prohibits the DOT from implementing new policies as outlined in that Dear Colleague letter that was sent out in June. I'm sure you saw, Brad. Additionally, it provides $900 million for the BUILD program, which is a little less than what Congress had provided before. But this time, there were some concerns expressed by the conferees saying that they didn't like how the department allocated BUILD grants last time. So they're now requiring that that the $900 million be split 50-50 urban and rural. Last time there was a large amount of rural projects that received BUILD grants, and very few projects went to urban areas.
But
That's
now it's going to be split 50-50, that 900, did you say billion or million?
Million, sorry. Million with an M.
That does make a difference.
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Steve's on the phone too. Steve, you want to talk about the provisions? They dropped out the rolling stock provision and the other provisions. There were a couple statutory provisions in there.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. And Commissioner, how are you?
I'm anxious to see you again, Steve. How come you didn't come down last month?
Harry doesn't let me go very far. I'm tethered to my desk while he travels the country. That's all. No, I wish that was true. But so what the conferees did drop out was a provision that was included in both House and Senate bills that would have limited contracts from it precluded any transit agency from using FTA money to buy rolling stock made by the Chinese. And for purposes of PSTA, that would have meant you could not buy a BYD bus. That provision was taken out of the bill, so there are no limitations on where PSTA can buy its buses in the future going forward, at least for this fiscal year, and we'll see what happens in the future. The issue of concern was not the Chinese. Some of it was underbidding because the companies, both the rail car company and BYD, do have federal government or government support from the Chinese. But the real concern that seemed to hit a lot of people was there is a concern that the Chinese are including listening devices or monitoring devices in some of the rail cars. BYD kind of got swept up in that. There wasn't a specific allegation that we heard about, but that was public anyway, but a lot of this is confidential and secret. So anyway, there is no limitation for fiscal year 2019, but that's what Harry was referring to that was dropped out.
Excellent.
And Steve, there are also provisions in there to keep forcing them to FTA to spend their money by the end of next December, correct?
Correct, yeah. They have to, within the Capital Investment Grant Program this year, FY18, which we're done with, and FY19 this year, they're directed to spend a certain percentage of the Capital Investment Grant Program. As Shannon said, that's where the money for the Small Starts project will come from. And in the current fiscal year, the bill they just finished up, it has to be 85% of that $2.6 billion has to be spent by January 1st of next year. So they give them time to move ahead, but they're really basically saying, we don't want you dragging your feet like you have been.
Well, that's
So
good news.
the other the other update, not so good news, is we were hopeful that it would be the other way around, but the new chairwoman, Nita Lowey of the House Appropriations Committee, announced on Friday that the committee is not going to entertain earmark requests in the fiscal year 20 appropriations process. She had been, since becoming chair at the beginning of the year, very outspoken in support of earmarks, as had Steny Hoyer. But she sent a letter to her colleagues on Friday saying that because there wasn't enough Republican support for bringing back the earmark program, they're going to defer until a later time. So there won't be any earmarks this year. But Steve was at a meeting, I believe, with Congressman DeFazio, and he was talking about creating an earmark program. He's calling it Article 1 because Article 1 of the Constitution projects that would be potentially considered in any kind of an infrastructure bill they do this year. Is that correct, Steve?
Yeah, and I think the simplest way to say it, thank you, Harry, I think the simplest way to say it is that the House Democrats have all said they want to bring back earmarks. They're struggling to figure out if they can and how they're going to do it. So trying to understand where things are, even Peter DeFazio has indicated that earmarks will probably, he'd like to bring them back as a part of the reauthorization of the FAST Act, but that doesn't come up until next year either. So I think my hunch is that I don't see any legislation moving this year with earmarks in it, but that doesn't mean that next year they won't be included.
And then the only other item I would add is just as a federal update, that because the budget process stretched out so late to finish up in February, the President's budget, which was supposed to be submitted the first week in February, will now be submitted in 2 chunks this month. On March 11th, we understand the President's going to submit his, what they call the skinny budget, kind of the big general overview document. And then on March 18th, he's going to actually submit the agency-by-agency budgets, which will be where we see the detail for what he's requesting for the Department of Transportation and FTA. So that will give you a report once that happens. But that means that the appropriations process is already about 6 weeks behind schedule. And so once they start, they're going to have to move pretty quickly if they want to try and get all their bills done, which is their stated goal before the end of September. The other issue, I don't know if Brad mentioned, Brad, I don't know if you mentioned, Brad's going to be in town next, and some of your staff will be in town the week of the 18th of March for the APTA conference, and Brad has been invited again to participate in a Senate Banking Committee panel discussion on issues related to the FTA. Correct, Brad?
Correct. That's right.
So that's great for PSTA that they continue to invite you all to participate in these discussions, because that'll be very helpful as they prepare to do their next highway. Their FAST Act reauthorization has to occur sometime between now and the end of next year. And so these are roundtable meetings we're starting to have at the staff level to look at issues that are important to agencies like yours. And so it's great that Brad's being invited to participate in that.
If I could add,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, before we wrap up, just one other thing too. This is not the legislation itself, but the Congress is moving ahead, both House and Senate, with hearings on infrastructure and how they could structure an infrastructure bill. The House Ways and Means Committee, which is the tax writing committee, is holding a hearing on Wednesday. And what's significant about that is everybody agrees on the need for more money for infrastructure, but this is the committee that actually has to generate the revenue to pay for it. So it will be kind of the first time we'll hear from that committee about some ideas about what they may want to come up with for infrastructure. Some of it may be a gas tax increase, and maybe other kinds of revenue like eliminating tax cuts or something else. And then there is a Senate hearing this week on trying to expedite project delivery. So some of the pieces are starting to come together in terms of background for our infrastructure bill, but it's going to take a little bit of time before we know what it really starts to look like if it happens.
I don't like that word, if.
Again, it's money, as you know.
Yeah. So for the members of the committee, and thank you, Harry and Steve. So just sort of a higher level look at our #1 priority with the federal government, which is getting our money for our rapid transit project. We're moving beyond, the design has now moved beyond 30%. When we come up there, and it will just be staff, and I know Congress is not in session, when we come up there in March 18th, I still haven't gotten an email back from Beth Day with FTA, but hopefully we'll meet with Beth and then and Tyronda, our FTA people that are looking at our project. And then we're hopefully also going to try to schedule with the FTA's Office of Project Management to get a project management officer assigned to our project. I think that is a strategy. I think it's a good strategy that we've come up with to try to keep FTA focused on our project and getting it approved this year. So hopefully we'll have at least those two meetings when we're in Washington with the staff, and then we're on schedule to complete our design activities this summer, and then we would come up again with more of a political advocacy kind of trip where we would advocate with our appropriations committee member, Congressman Christ, and others to fund the project, fund the federal share of the project in the current calendar year. I guess that's FY19 funding, FTA FY19 funding, so that we would have a small starts grant agreement signing ceremony here with Congressman Christ and maybe Secretary Chow in lovely St. Petersburg in sometime this fall. So the goal really of the March trip is just to kind of keep the pressure on FTA, hopefully get them to assign the project management oversight person to us, which is really usually a consultant, and then and really get into negotiations with them this summer. So hopefully everything that you just said to us, it sounds like it would lead us still to be hopeful of that kind of process.
So, Harry or Steve, after we get off this phone call, could you have a discussion in Shannon and try to map out what that would look like from a time frame for us, just because some of us have some very aggressive schedules over the summer and fall, and that would be important to try to get some idea of what we're talking about in terms of dates.
We'll be happy to. I think we need to work with Brad and the staff, though, in terms of a lot of that is dependent on project submission and information they're providing to the FTA, but we can then work with that to try to map out what we think the FTA might do.
Okay, that'd be great. Great report. I mean, it sounds like things are actually starting to get done up there.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because it really, when Congress and President finally put aside the fiscal year 19 appropriations bills and the funding for the wall, there was a little bit of a dead start for everything, and you're right. Now things are starting to happen, and we don't know the outcome of anything, but at least they're starting to build some of the foundation for legislation.
Yeah.
Hey, Commissioner, the one thing that you're going to have to monitor, too, is one of the key decisions that's going to have to be made here in the next couple of weeks is Congress has to raise, they have these artificial spending caps that are in place right now, and every 2 years there's a bipartisan agreement to raise those caps for defense and non-defense spending. That happened 2 years ago, and that's what enabled Congress to provide so much extra funding for things like transportation programs that Shannon mentioned earlier. Right now, the 2-year agreement ran out with fiscal year 19, so for fiscal year 20 and 21, there is no agreement in place. And if the Congress doesn't raise the caps, then we're back into sequestration mode where spending actually goes down, not up, which it could be problematic. And so right now, the leadership in the Congress and the Appropriations Committee are trying to reach a bipartisan agreement to raise those spending levels, which will now allow the appropriations process to move forward. So it's not one of those things you're probably going to read much about in the papers, but it's happening, and if they don't get that agreement, it's going to be very difficult for the appropriators to do their job over the next couple of weeks.
Well, you'll
let you know how that goes.
You'll keep us posted, right?
We will, yes.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Anything that I've forgotten? No other business?
Well, as you know, we are working on a lot of these different issues. These are on our list of due diligence items to tackle and track down, you know, to see what, to make sure there's no stone unturned as far as looking for either ways we can be more efficient or identify additional revenue. So lots of these legislative things, both in Tallahassee and some of the ones in DC, been keeping on schedule, impacts our financial forecast. So it's great that we have both of our legislative teams working so well on all these different things.
Good.
Yeah.
And Brad, on that front, I checked, Debbie and I swapped emails on Friday because we were checking, there was concerns that with the shutdown, the 35-day shutdown, that some of your payments to the agency might have been delayed from FTA, but Debbie was indicating they did a really good job at FTA in catching up with the back work, and that I think the federal payments seem to have caught up, and you guys are in pretty good shape. Is that correct, Brad?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great.
That's good.
Very good. Do we need to say thank you to anybody in particular, Harry?
I think maybe Brad can do that when he sees Beth Day in 2 weeks. That might be a good conversation to have.
Okay, great.
Will do.
All righty. Anything from our new members?
Not
Tina?
today.
Patty? No? Heather?
Nothing today.
No? Charlie? Everybody's so happy today. All right, then.
I'm not happy, Janet. I'm worried to pieces.
I'm so sorry. We'll
It's
try to say
really
what we
kind of
can do
hard
about it.
in my head for me to say, okay, guys, you went out and got a job. Now we're not going to send you to work anymore. That's hard.
Okay, on that note, we are adjourned till the next time.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you, guys.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Everybody.
So weren't you in Tallahassee?
Because it's Monday.
I thought you went, like, just right when we went, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I went with you. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
How was yours?
I haven't heard from Charlie.
I'm waiting to hear if we get the variance or not.
Okay.
But it was a quick trip.
Oh, quick.